Emily and Victoria Della Cava, and we are juniors at Tappan Zee High School.
For this year's National History Day competition, we have chosen 8 revolutionary figures throughout history that we feel have impacted the world today.
In researching these figures, we have compared them to one another in a bracket-style competition in order to see who is the most influential revolutionary of all time.
Our final decision was reached through statements made by history teachers at our school and student opinions, both of which allowed us to determine who was the most influential revolutionary of all time. Genghis Khan was born in northern Mongolia in the year 1155. He had a hard childhood when his father was murdered and he had to carry the burden of supporting his family. When he was 20, he began his ascent to power by building a large army of 20,000 men. The expanse of land stretched from China to Eastern Europe. Even though the Mongol Empire was short-lived, it is estimated that 30 to 40 million people died as a result. Genghis once said, "It is not sufficient that I succeed, all others must fail."
Harriet Beecher Stowe, author and painter with over 30 books published, influenced not only America but the world with her writing and determination. Languages and a bestseller in America, Asia, Europe, and Britain. Uncle Tom's Cabin changed people's perspective on slavery forever. It told of the troubles slaves faced and the hard work and forced labor they had to go through. Not only that, but it also demanded the help from people to give slaves rights by forming abolition movements. Harriet Beecher once said, "The enslaving of an African race is a clear violation of the great law which commands us to love our neighbors as ourselves."
Alright, so Genghis Khan was like a conqueror, he went out, fought people, was killing everyone.
Harriet Beecher Stowe is the most influential revolutionary.
I think Genghis Khan is more influential because of all the wars he led.
As leader of France, Napoleon made numerous reforms from taxes to education. He created new civil laws called the Napoleonic Codes. These laws have been tremendously influential to the governments of other nations around the world, having guided 1/4 of the world's jurisdiction since its creation. As Emperor of France, Napoleon exercised a tremendous amount of power and waged warfare against most of the European continent.
Martin Luther King Jr. spent a majority of his adult life working toward ending the oppression and segregation against African Americans. Though African Americans gained freedom and political rights during Reconstruction, segregation continued to be a huge problem. Because of this, Martin Luther King became an advocate for the end of segregation and gaining true equality for all. His ability to give inspiring speeches, such as his "I Have a Dream" speech, made audiences feel moved and inspired. The credibility he gained through his spoken word helped him influence black and whites alike. Because he gained so many enemies throughout his life, he was assassinated in 1968. Today, we still celebrate Martin Luther King Day as a reminder of the man that today is still seen as an icon for his work for justice and racial equality.
Who would you say was more influential, Napoleon Bonaparte or Martin Luther King Jr.?
Regarding today's society, I would have to say Martin Luther King Jr. because without him, America would not be where it is today for African Americans.
Adolf Hitler is one of the most infamous historical figures of all time. Remembered for his brutality against the Jews, his obsession with the Aryan race, and his involvement in World War II, his legacy is one that is hard to forget and has greatly shaped how the world is today. After the war, Hitler began to speak publicly about his views of how the German government should be run. Karl Ludek, who published the book I Knew Hitler, stated, "He held the audience, and me with them, under a hypnotic spell by the sheer force of his conviction." By the time he committed suicide in 1945, his influence was palpable. He caused the death of 6 million Jews by forcibly removing them from their homes and forcing them into concentration camps. He also had the blood of 50 million soldiers on his hand due to the fact that he was the major cause of World War II.
In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. With the belief that the earth was round and not flat, Christopher Columbus was motivated and determined to find a new path to India. After being funded by Queen and King of Spain, Columbus was off on his exploration. However, what he thought was India that he landed on was actually land that we now know as America. There he met Native Americans who taught him farming techniques and shared their culture, while Columbus took their wealth and sold them to slavery.
I believe that Christopher Columbus is the more influential of the two. When we think about Hitler, he was a charismatic speaker, obviously. He had revolutionary ideas, and he obviously perpetrated acts of evil. There are a significant number of other individuals historically who have perpetrated these acts of evil. If you focus in China on Mao, Stalin in Soviet Russia, Pol Pot, we can look all throughout the globe and find this, but I think the multitude of effects that were ushered in as a result of Columbus's voyage and as a result of the Columbian Exchange truly and dramatically influenced the globe more long-term than Hitler.
Say you want a revolution, well, you know, we all want to change the world.
Mahatma Gandhi was one of the most influential political and spiritual leaders of his time. He was a seeker of truth and believed in resistance of unjust rule through civil disobedience. Though he was born to a strict family in India, he traveled to England in 1888 to study law, where he became inspired by individualism and Enlightenment thought. He later traveled to South Africa, where he experienced firsthand the discrimination and racism placed on Indians there. This experience caused him to emerge as an Indian community leader and express his beliefs of nonviolence. Even today, Gandhi is seen as a beacon of hope for the oppressed. His ideologies inspire campaigns and protests around the world for human rights and democracy.
Julius Caesar was a tremendously influential politician, general, and writer who played a key role in leading to the Roman Republic transforming into the great Roman Empire that the world knows today. He made remarkable contributions in the military, the law, history, mathematics, and even the calendar. The government that he created lasted for centuries and shaped governments around the world. After declaring himself dictator for life of Rome, he revolutionized Roman law and society and developed a distinct culture.
They both came from rather humble roots, can be considered self-made men. They both pushed for social reforms, were concerned with the common man. They both were multi-dimensional men who were interested in a variety of areas. They were both writers, for example. And in some ways, they were both rather flawed individuals in their personal lives. However, with that said, it is the way that each defines leaders, or what a leader is, that makes them different. Gandhi saw leadership in a more moral distinction. He saw himself as not just a politician, but a moral leader. And so his issues and concerns, and I have some ideas here, he fought caste oppression, he fought gender oppression, he dealt with religious hatred, he dealt with poverty. These are the types of things that he was interested in. And because of that, his idea of nonviolent protest influenced people from not only Martin Luther King Jr. to Nelson Mandela, but John Lennon and Albert Einstein. And so, in their own words, Julius Caesar said, "I came, I saw, I conquered," as his sort of ultimate message. But Gandhi said, "Victory attained by violence is tantamount to defeat, for it is only momentary." And perhaps that is his legacy to us.
You tell me that it's evolution, well, you know, we all want to change the world.
There was so much exploration going on, it seems inevitable. If not 1492 by Christopher Columbus, could it have been 1502 by, somebody else? And if someone else had done it shortly after Christopher Columbus, would the world be a dramatically different place? I mean, I think like the question screams, no, it doesn't really matter about Christopher Columbus the individual. It's not just what Gandhi stood for, but Gandhi's way of doing it, civil disobedience, passive resistance, and his focus on peace, and even the way people view him as a spiritual leader. That Gandhi's influence isn't just political, but in many ways goes beyond just politics. And maybe there were other national leaders behind Gandhi had Gandhi never been born, but I don't know if there was another Gandhi. A man like Gandhi, a person like Gandhi only comes around every 1,000 years. So I think if you asked, 100 people who are knowledgeable in history, I think, 98 of them would probably say Columbus. Because by the numbers, Columbus is more influential. He literally affects hundreds of millions of people. But I can't stop thinking about the whole It's a Wonderful Life idea. Had Columbus never been born, would these things not have happened? Now, we don't know. But I just feel strongly that those things would have happened had Columbus not been born. Had Gandhi not been born, I'm not sure the world would be the same place. So, I'm shocking myself here. My answer is going to be Gandhi.
But when you talk about destruction, don't you know that you can count me out? Don't you know it's gonna be alright? Alright. Alright.
And the winner is Gandhi! Woo!
We chose Gandhi as the most influential revolutionary for the following reasons.
Gandhi's philosophies of civil disobedience have been practiced throughout history by many other revolutionaries, including Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King's activism was more concentrated in America and specifically within the civil rights movement of African Americans seeking equality in the mid-1900s. While this was very important for both the white and the African American community, it was a very American issue and was not as widespread as Gandhi. Due to the fact that Martin Luther King is a contemporary revolutionary, his legacy is not complete. Therefore, we are not able to fully comprehend the extent of his movements and ideas, and therefore his legacy is not complete.